Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the seventh film in our miniseries, Fantastic Foodie Films, Tampopo, a Japanese comedy written, produced, and directed by Juzo Itami with Tsutomu Yamazaki, Ken Watanabe, perhaps best known to American audiences, and Nobuko Miyamoto. This film is a spoof based on the American movie Shane, made in 1955. When it was released, Itami called it the first ramen Western, which is a play on the term spaghetti Western used to describe Western movies produced by Italian filmmakers. In fact, the Goro character is cast in the image of John Wayne, and the film has been compared to Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars. This movie demonstrates the eccentric humor which is often seen in Japanese comedies. Tampopo deals with the Japanese love of ritual that has made an art of noodle slurping. In Japanese culture, this custom is not frowned upon, but is rather viewed as a compliment to the chef. Early in the film, a bowl of noodles is actually compared to a Jackson Pollock painting. The film winks at Japanese-style ribaldry. After all, this is the culture that invented the love hotel, while it fuses with in-your-face allusions to spaghetti westerns. Tampopo was well received when it opened. Roger Ebert wrote in the Chicago Sun-Times, "This very, very Japanese movie, which seems to make no effort to communicate with other cultures, is universally funny. For that reason, Tampopo has a Greek chorus of noodle enophiles and noodle-loving cowboys." Plot summary. Tampopo is the widowed owner of a decrepit roadside noodle shop, or ramen-ya. Two truck drivers, Goro and Gun, ride into town, and in the course of sampling Tampopo's cuisine, they evaluate noodles as sincere but lacking in character. Goro is a Clint Eastwood-type character who fancies himself a noodle connoisseur. He and Gun set out to help her turn the shop into the finest ramen-ya in the land. This necessitates some research into the fine art of noodle making, and even a little swindling, as they sample her competitors' wares and wheedle out their noodle recipes and trade secrets. The main narrative is interspersed with stories involving food on several levels. One vignette involves a lowly worker who upstages his bosses by displaying his vast culinary knowledge while ordering his meal at a gourmet French restaurant. Another depicts a woman's etiquette class on the proper consumption of spaghetti. Another involves a woman who rises from her deathbed to cook one last meal for her family. And yet another tells the story of a supermarket clerk who has to deal with an aged woman obsessed with squeezing all the soft food. The primary subplot is about a Yakuza gangster and his lover, both dressed in white, who explore the erotic uses of food. In the end, the gangster is shot several times by an unknown assailant to his lover's horror, but uses his last words to convey his recipe for sausage. Tampopo constantly puns off stereotypical American movie themes, characters, movies, and camera setups and shots. Juzo Itami, 1933 to 97, was a Japanese writer, producer, and director who directed 11 films over the course of his career. He did not become a director-screenwriter until he turned 50. He's been compared to the French director Jacques Tati, who used similar styles of critiquing his society's transition while crafting similar portrayals of humor and sadness. Tampopo is Itami's best-known film in the West. He claimed that the movie was a satirical comedy about noodle making, cooking, serving, and consumption. He also said it was about people who take noodles seriously, who read books that tell them how to enjoy the pork affectionately, while they slurp the noodles that have been activated by the soup. Ken Watanabe, who plays Gun in the movie, is perhaps the only cast member in this film who has become widely known in America. He's recognized for his roles in Letters from Iwo Jima, The Last Samurai, and Memoirs of a Geisha, and for his Tony-nominated Broadway debut in the title role of the Lincoln Center revival of The King and I in 2015. Fun facts about the film. Nobuko Miyamoto, who plays Tampopo, is Itami's wife. The director wrote this part for her. Ramen are not native to Japan. They were introduced from China in the earliest 19th century and became ubiquitous after World War I, when the U.S. flooded Japan with cheap wheat. The Yakuza gangster and his moll, who are dressed in white, represent Western movie tropes. The omelette and tramp sequence is an homage to Charlie Chaplin. When Goro washes his back, he dumps a bucket full of water on it but doesn't use any soap. This is a washing ritual that is part of the Shinto religion. Many of Tampopo's elements reference classical Western tropes. When Goro and Gun ride into town, they are both wearing cowboy hats and bandanas around their necks. Goro is the mysterious Shane-like stranger who arrives in town to save the pretty girl and fight off the bad guys. The old name of Tampopo's shop is Rai Rai Ken. Years later, when the first authentic ramen ya opened in New York City, it took its name from Tampopo's shop. The noodle shop in the train station is quite realistic. Many Japanese train stations have noodle shops, lunch stands, and diners, since Japanese trains frequently do not have food service. The exhausted woman married to the running man is suffering from karashi, meaning worked to death. Many Japanese suffer from overwork. The pearl diver carries no air tanks. When the junior exec orders different foods from his boss, this goes against Japanese tradition. Underlings are supposed to follow their elders at all times. Goro means bull in Japanese. In the breakfast scene, Tampopo's son's t-shirts reads Ichiban, which means number one. The music played throughout the film includes Le Prelude by Franz Liszt. This was one of the themes of The Lone Ranger. The music heard while the credits roll is played by a famous Amsterdam barrel organ called the Arabai. Things to look for. Goro's cowboy hat. The Yakuza gangster and his moll, all dressed in white. The Lone Ranger theme. The barrel organ music playing under the credits. The omelette sequence. The Ichiban t-shirt. Slurping noodle sounds, which are audible on the soundtrack. Train station restaurants. The pearl diver scene. The junior exec who dares to order his own unique food. Now, folks, it's time to watch Tampopo. Settle down, polish your chopsticks, and wait a minute or two for the film to roll. Enjoy.